Chapter 11. Until they bring the streetcars back. When I pulled in the alley, Gretchen was leaning against the brick wall in the wacky little baker's cap and a long brown coat that looked like the sadness you see hanging in DPs and newsreels. On DPs and newsreels. She acted like she didn't notice the truck, but I could tell she was glad I'd come. I opened the back door and sat on an empty grocery box, and she stared off into the alley, and we could gab without anyone knowing. Sometimes I daydream about going to a dance, she said. I know it's a sin, but I do it anyway. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody daydreams. I pretend I'm going to a movie, or I get asked to join a sorority, or I go to a slumber party and I have nice friends. Do you daydream? Yeah, sure, all the time. What about? She glanced at me. Oh, I don't know. About winning a football game, scoring a touchdown. I don't know why, but I didn't want to tell her about Lola. I brought you something, I said. What is that? Her eyes darted towards me for a second. Here. I held out the shoebox. She glanced at the bakery door, but it was closed, and she took the Schumann's box and backed over to the wall. Open it, I said. She peeked into the box as if one of those coiled springs was going to pop up at her or something, and when she saw the loafers, her low lip almost hit the ground. Crumb. She looked like she was a starving kid I'd just given a burger and fries, and I had to look away. See if they fit, I said. Go ahead, put them on. She set the box down like it had a live puppy in it and pulled off one of her gunboats and slipped on a loafer. I, hopped out of the truck and felt her toes with my thumb. It's too big. I'll change it. The guy at the store said I could. I backed into the truck while she put her weight on the shiny loafer and inspected it. They must have cost a lot, she said. No, they weren't much. I felt a rush of happiness and then it got all mixed up with sadness because a pair of 7.95 shoes was such a big deal to her, like no one had ever done anything nice for her since the day she was born. I can't keep them. My father would beat me, she told me, and I could see how disappointed she was. I got that all figured out. I'll bring them to school, see, and you can keep them in your locker. I'll bring some white socks, and you can put them on in the morning and take them off before you meet your dad, and he'll never know. She looked at me a second and then down at the loafer, like she was thinking about it. Then she changed shoes and came over to the truck and handed me the box. If I take them, will you promise you'll never tell anyone what I tell you? I took the loafers and she backed over to the bakery wall. Yeah, I promise. No one. Ever. Not your parents or friends or the police. No one. If you ever tell anyone, he'll know I told you and he'll kill me. The way she said it made my throat go dry and I wondered what I was getting into. Okay, I promise. I won't ever. I've got to tell someone, she hesitated, like basically she didn't trust me or something. Then she looked then she looked into my eyes. And you're the only one I can tell. I promise. Swear to God, I'll never tell anyone. My father made Helga have the baby. He did that to her. Her chin was trembling and her hands were shaking, and she looked down the alley like she was afraid her father could hear her from downtown. And he made her do it, what she did to it. Cripes, I felt kind of sick. I wanted to slam the back door of the truck and speed away. I don't know what to do, she said. I'm afraid. The back door of the bakery swung open and the baker came out, all smudged with flour and carrying a pail. She stiffened and stared down the alley like I wasn't there. I started rearranging boxes of groceries in the back of my truck like I was busy working, and the guy dumped the heaping pail of garbage in the can. Done eating, Gresham? He asked. Yes, sir. She followed him into the bakery and the door shut. I drove away and I didn't want to admit it, but my bones told me I was being sucked into something I couldn't get out of. Wednesday night I came home from practice starving, and I hoped we'd have pot roast or spaghetti and meatballs or something. But when I asked my mother what was for supper, she said leftovers. God, my mother was famous for leftovers. She could grow leftovers. Like we could have 2 regular meals in a week and the other 5 would be leftovers. Sometimes they weren't too bad, but sometimes it was hard to stomach. Like the time she mixed some greasy chicken gravy with the pea soup. Geez, even my dad couldn't get that down. and he usually made us eat whatever she stuck in front of us. She was the only one I ever heard who could make a 2-pound meatloaf without any meat. About once a year, my dad would tell us how he and my mother moved into their apartment when they got married, and the first meal she served was leftovers. The next night, my dad wasn't taking any chances, and he took her out for dinner. After my mother looked over the menu, she told the waitress she'd like leftovers. My dad said he knew he was in trouble when the waitress said, "Sorry, we throw them out," and my mother said, "What time?" I really shouldn't make fun of my mother because she went through some hard times getting through the depression, and that wasn't easy, and she had to be careful not to waste anything and never had much for herself. She wanted to have a big family with lots of kids, but the depression took that dream away from her. And when I catch her saving a sliver of soup or eating scraps of food off our plates in the kitchen, I don't kid her anymore because she had to make ends meet for so long she forgets. At supper, Peggy pulled up her skirt and showed us an oozing scraped knee, and she was plenty mad. Bobby Overby pushed me down at recess, and the teacher didn't even do anything to him. My dad glanced at the massacred knee with the rest of us. "Spit on it," he said. That was his usual response when any of us got hurt. I could see myself coming home with one leg torn off by a truck, and my dad glanced at the bloody stump, saying, "Spit on it." "What did you do to him?" my mother asked. "Nothing. I didn't do anything. He just came up and pushed me," Peggy said. I wondered why it was whenever something happened to us, my parents always thought it was our fault. Didn't they know that things just happen to you sometimes? I thought I might punch Bobby Overby in the face the next time I ran into him. Calling Lola was like pouring iodine on a floor burn, and I put it off as long as possible. Our High Y was sponsoring a skirt and sweater dance Saturday, and all night I tried to work up the guts while Peggy hung around the kitchen like a spy. Then my father came out for his usual bowl of ice cream before listening to the evening news on the radio. I don't think my parents could sleep if Cedric Adams didn't assure them that the universe was going to hold together for another day. My dad would sit facing our old big Philco and try not to miss a word while my mother ironed his uniform shirts. I had leaned over to interrupt when Cedric Adams' booming voice was banging off the living room wall. In between the kitchen traffic, I dial all but the last number and hang up in a sweat. I forced my hand to dial like it was a pirate being prodded off the gangplank or something, all the numbers, and then I stood like I was paralyzed, listening, holding on my breath. It rang, and Lola answered. "Hello," she said. Geez, I hung up. I waited until I heard if she was going with Tom, and I limped to my room feeling real lousy. Cripes, what a chicken. I kept thinking about it, and I couldn't fall asleep, and I could hear McCluskey's dog whining, and I got madder and madder. I got up and pulled on my shoes and slipped my jacket over my pajamas and sneaked down the back stairs into the basement. Into the boiler room, I grabbed a rusty crowbar we never used and went out into the alley. It was cold. There wasn't anyone around, and I sneaked over to the wood fence and called the dog with a whisper, and he started licking my hand like crazy between the boards. I stuck the crowbar under the slat and started prying. The nails were screeching away as if they were ratting on me, but the slat came loose at the bottom. I slid it sideways and was going to loosen the second one when the skinny dog slipped out through the narrow space. He licked my face and whined like he was happy, and jumped up on me with big ears, were flopping all over the place, and I slid the board back in place and tapped the nails in with the crowbar. "Okay, fella, you're free to go. Go on. Get out of here." I pointed down the alley, and I figured a lot of nice people would take him in. I knew I couldn't hide him in my closet, thanked me for his baggy face, and wagged his tail like he was trying to throw it away. And then he took off around the fence and headed for McCluskey's house. "No, no, here, boy," I yelled in a whisper. But he charged right up to the back step and started woofing and scratching at the door. Gosh, I couldn't believe it. Why didn't he get away when he could? "Here, boy, come here. Here, boy," I called quietly. He came barreling back to the corner of the alley and jumped on me. I pointed down the alley. "Go on now. Get out of here. Go on. Get away." I heard McCuskey's back door open, and I ducked behind the fence. Sweat was pouring out of me like an engine oil, and I thought he might have already spotted me. The dog was licking my face, and I was glad there wasn't much light in the alley by then. McCluskey whistled The dog hesitated a minute, like he couldn't make up his mind. Then he trotted back to the door, and I heard McCluskey scolding him, and I heard the door shut. I peeked over the top of the fence and then hightailed it for my apartment. When I got in bed, I hoped McCluskey couldn't tell someone had pried open the fence, and I tried to figure out what was the matter with the poor dog. Maybe he was too scared to run away, like he thought McCluskey was like God or something, and could find him wherever he hid him. I started praying for Gretchen, but I didn't understand about prayer or how it was supposed to work. I believed in God, I really did, and I'd been praying since I was a little kid. Golly, the prayer my mother taught me to pray when I'd go to bed used to scare the toenails off me. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. Holy smoke. I used to try to stay awake as long as I could because I was scared I'd die when I went to sleep or something. But I didn't know how to pray for Gretchen. Didn't God know about what was going on with her and her father? And if he did, why did I have to remind him to do something about it? Didn't he care more about her than I did? It was really confusing, but I prayed that he'd save Gretchen and throw her father into the penitentiary at Stillwater for about 11,000 years, and even though I didn't understand how it worked, I kept praying like crazy because I didn't know what else to do.